Yeah, so first I saw this dude post this and says Peter Thiel is enriching in uranium. So I saw that he was involved in this company and I'm like, "Oh wait, what is this?" So it's called General Matter. I started looking it up. I found a couple of links. Let's see what I got. But there were some things I knew about Peter Thiel's history as well and the history of his family that really caught my eye with this. Billionaire Peter Thiel backing first privately developed U.S. uranium enrichment facility in Paducah. A California based company with ties to billionaire investor and Trump ally Peter Thiel announced plans Friday to build America's first U.S. owned, privately developed facility to enrich uranium in far western Kentucky. General Matter said that the company intends to make a historic investment in American nuclear infrastructure by restoring a shuttered facility in Paducah. The gaseous diffusion plant in McCracken County, which ceased operations in 2013, was built by the U.S. government in the 1950s to bolster national defense efforts and later generate fuel for nuclear plants. Let's see. It's also led by a former SpaceX employee, and he's a partner at the venture capital firm Founders Fund. Founders Fund, as we talked about the other night, is Peter Thiel's investment company. So Scott Noland is a partner and he is running this thing. So this isn't just something that Peter Thiel is invested in. This is something that he is very closely involved in. And this thing was just founded last year. A couple of articles went around about it a few months ago, but I don't really think it got a lot of news. I didn't really see it. There has been a lot of news this year though that things are hard to keep up with. But when I saw this, I instantly thought of the fact that I've always heard stories about Peter Thiel and how he grew up in this crazy town in South Africa where they praised Hitler. I've heard about the town before, and I was remember being shocked that he was from it, even though not shocked, but being like, "That's kinda crazy." And his family reportedly was very involved in this uranium mine nearby that, was extremely dangerous for the people who worked there. And I found this article that somebody put together earlier this year that went into some of the sources about this. So, yeah, this is kind of an interesting angle because this is like he's getting back into the family business in a way. Klaus Thiel, who also was very good friends with Klaus Schwab, apparently, moved his family to occupied Namibia to help South African apartheid regime create a secret nuclear program. So this says in 1968, Suzanne and Klaus Thiel left Frankfurt am Main, West Germany, with their 1-year-old son Peter for Cleveland, Ohio. There is little information about Klaus other than what Peter himself offered to his biographers, which is that Klaus was a chemical engineer. One detail we don't know, for example, is why Klaus left Germany for America, but we do know what was happening in Frankfurt before he left. Now, this I had not known until I came across this article, and this is pretty wild. So, the Frankfurt Auschwitz trials were the trials of 21 or 22 Nazi personnel who served at the Auschwitz camp complex between 1940 and 1945. The trials primarily took place in Frankfurt am Main between 20th of December 1963 and 20th of August 1965. The second trial took place between the 14th of December and the 1st of September. Three of the former senior staff in the camp were tried. One was sentenced to life, and the two were sentenced to prison terms. So the third trial took place between the 30th of August, 1967, and 14th of June, 1968. And they were charging people pretty harshly. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that this family who fled Germany while they were having trials, to try to bring the Nazis to justice, maybe not fled, but left, and then didn't really like that very much, so they moved to one of the most infamous Nazi towns in South Africa. Like, that just it just seems to be quite an equation there. After arriving in the United States with his young family in the 1960s, apparently Klaus Thiel was dissatisfied with his new home, and yet, like I was explaining, after applying for U.S. citizenship, left America within a few years with his wife and son for apartheid South Africa. Thiel worked for a chemical engineering contractor, which was helping create a uranium mine in what was then South Africa occupied Namibia. The mine, called Rössing, was a part of a secret operation to provide nuclear weapon to the racist apartheid regime. Yeah, interesting fact that they shut down their nuclear program after apartheid ended, allegedly anyway. Let's see. What article was that leak into? In March 1993, South Africa had secretly developed a small nuclear arsenal and then junked it, was startling in its candor. Nevertheless, President's announcement left many questions unanswered regarding the scope and sophistication of the program. Trying to read this is really small. The bedrock question is, of course, is why South Africa developed and built 7 fission weapons in the first place. Yeah, and they say this was no ordinary mine. It was notorious for its brutality. See what it says here. Where is this from? Here's a fascinating document from I wish I knew what the source was for this. They don't give a source for what's going on here. So, company received a license to mine uranium, but the license was apparently illegal because it was given. Okay. So what I'm trying to find is what his exact role was, because I think calling him a chemical engineer, which was what Peter Thiel called him, was really underplaying his significance in this, because it seemed like he was dealing with businesses outside of Africa to get involved in this. And yeah, here it talks about the human rights record and the slave labor that happened there, and how I remember hearing in another story how they used to give people the paychecks through this, like, thick, apparently radioactive proof glass or something like that, because they didn't wanna get hurt themselves, but didn't care and didn't really tell the workers what was going on, and there's a lot of environmental issues too. So this talks about the Namibian, independence movement in the 1980s that implicates the UK and the UN in profiting from and enabling this criminal operation, which was run by the mostly UK monarchy owned mining behemoth Rio Tinto. Yeah, and it looks like this is the progression of when it was built and when it operated. During the 1970s, while his father was participating in setting up this depraved uranium operation, Peter was in a South African apartheid non denominational Christian school called Pridwin, which is still, despite all the laws against it, apparently a haven for racism. However, in 1975, Thiel changed schools again to a German school in Namibia, which was then being illegal occupied by the apartheid South African regime. Despite having been told by the UN that they had no right to be there. Okay, yeah, so this was the one that was famously one of the last places where it was common to greet each other with hail. Yeah, probably not gonna say that audibly. So that is how they greeted each other in the place where Peter Thiel grew up. And like, you can't. This stuff is so crazy. And the school that Peter Thiel went celebrated his birthday. What? That is insane. A date. Wow. It sucks that it's on 420. I don't like that. I've never liked that. The company that ran Klaus Thiel's uranium mine has a very shameful history. This includes, so they were even helping out Hitler way back in the day.